close your eyes and let your breathing slow as we drift back through time, back through the decades, to the gentle summer of 1908. The modern world with its hurried pace falls away like autumn leaves, and you find yourself standing on a quiet, tree-lined avenue in Wimbledon, where the clip-clop of horses' hooves on cobblestones creates a rhythmic, soothing melody. The morning light filters through Irish lace curtains, casting delicate patterns across the Persian carpet of your modest but respectable room. You are no longer who you were. As you slowly open your eyes in this new world, you find yourself in a narrow iron bedstead with crisp white linens that smell faintly of lavender water and starch. The wallpaper, a William Morris design of intertwining willow leaves and soft sage green, surrounds you with its repetitive, calming pattern. You are Miss Catherine Hartwell now, a paid companion in the household of Mrs. Constance Ashford, a wealthy widow residing in one of Wimbledon's finest Victorian villas on Marriott Road. Your fingers, as you lift them to examine in the pale morning light, are smooth but practical, bearing the faint calluses of needlework rather than the softness of leisure. On the simple oak nightstand beside your bed rests a well-worn copy of Mrs. Beeton's Book of Household Management, a small leather-bound Bible, and a modest silver pocket watch, your most precious possession, a gift from your late mother. The floorboards creak gently beneath your feet as you rise, the wood cool against your skin through your thin cotton stockings. Your room, situated on the third floor of the house, neither with the family quarters nor entirely with the servants, perfectly reflects your position in this carefully ordered world. You are neither fish nor fowl, as Cook would say, but something in between, genteel enough to provide suitable companionship to Mrs. Ashford, yet dependent upon your employment for your very survival. As you perform your morning ablutions at the washstand, using the rose-scented soap that Mrs. Ashford kindly permits you to share, you catch sight of yourself in the small looking glass. Your hair, a soft brown like chestnuts in autumn, is already pinned in the simple Gibson girl style appropriate to your station, not too elaborate, which would be presumptuous, but neat and becoming enough to reflect well upon your employer. Your morning dress of dove gray poplin with its high collar and leg of mutton sleeves fits perfectly, neither too fashionable nor too plain. The house begins to stir around you. From below, you can hear the faint clatter of china as Mary, the housemaid, begins setting out the breakfast service in the morning room. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimes 7 times, its deep, resonant tone vibrating through the walls. Through your window, you can see the garden coming alive in the early morning mist, the well-manicured lawn stretching toward the tennis court that Mr. Ashford had installed before his passing 3 years ago, the rose garden heavy with dew, and beyond, the common lands of Wimbledon where the windmill stands sentinel against the lightning sky. Your day begins, as always, with a soft knock on Mrs. Ashford's door at precisely 7:30. She prefers to be awakened gently, with her curtains drawn just enough to let in the morning light but not so much as to startle her delicate constitution. "Good morning, Mrs. Ashford," you say in the modulated tone you've perfected over your 2 years in her service, warm enough to convey genuine care, but maintaining the proper distance required by your position. Mrs. Ashford, a handsome woman of 55 years with silver-streaked hair and kind blue eyes that carry a perpetual hint of sadness since her husband's death, stirs beneath her silk coverlet. Her bedroom is a testament to Edwardian prosperity. The massive mahogany furniture gleams with beeswax polish. The walls are covered in pale blue silk damask, and a portrait of the late Mr. Ashford in his military uniform watches over the room with benevolent authority. "Ah, Catherine, dear," she murmurs, using the familiar form of your name that indicates her favor, though never in front of other servants or social equals. What sort of day does it promise to be? You move to the window, your footsteps muffled by the thick Turkish carpet, and report on the weather, a crucial element in planning the day's activities. It appears to be a fine morning, ma'am. The gardener mentioned we might expect some clouds this afternoon, but nothing to prevent your planned visit to Mrs. Pemberton for tea. As you help Mrs. Ashford with her morning routine, selecting her clothing for the day, a practical morning dress of plum-colored wool crepe for the house, and her better afternoon calling dress of navy silk taffeta laid out for later, you discuss the day's correspondence. This is one of your primary duties, managing Mrs. Ashford's social calendar and correspondence with the intricate care it requires. We've received an invitation from Lady Worthington for her garden party next Tuesday, you inform her, holding the cream-colored card with its embossed lettering. And Mrs. Fairfax has written to inquire if you might join her charitable committee for the Wimbledon Hospital Fund. Mrs. Ashford sighs softly as you help arrange her hair, your fingers gentle but efficient with the silver-backed brushes and tortoiseshell combs. The Fairfax woman is terribly pushy, isn't she? Still, one must do one's duty for the less fortunate. Send our acceptance to Lady Worthington, her garden parties are always beautifully done, and tell Mrs. Fairfax I shall consider her proposal. The breakfast ritual follows, taken in the morning room with its cheerful yellow walls and windows overlooking the garden. Mrs. Ashford sits at the head of the small round table, while you take your place at her right, close enough to attend to her needs but positioned to indicate your subordinate status. The footman, James, serves deviled kidneys, kedgeree, and toast with marmalade from the sideboard, his movements precise and silent. The morning newspaper, carefully ironed to prevent ink transfer, rests beside Mrs. Ashford's place. You read aloud the society pages while Mrs. Ashford takes her breakfast, your voice maintaining the same soothing cadence that helps settle her nerves for the day ahead. The engagement announcements, the reports from recent balls and garden parties, the subtle scandals hinted at but never explicitly stated, all flow past like a gentle stream of social intelligence. Oh my! Mrs. Ashford exclaims softly as you read about the Honorable Miss Victoria Pennyweather's engagement to a Mr. Charles Fitzgerald. A younger son with no prospects, I hear. Her mother must be beside herself. Still, they say it's a love match. She pauses, stirring her tea with a delicate silver spoon. You're fortunate, Catherine, to be spared such complications. You lower your eyes appropriately, understanding the complex message in her words, part genuine sympathy for your unmarried state, part reminder of your position outside the marriage market that governs her social circle. At 28, you are firmly established as a spinster, your modest circumstances and lack of dowry having long ago removed you from consideration for marriage. Yet in some ways, as Mrs. Ashford suggests, this grants you a certain freedom from the anxieties that plague young women of the upper classes. The late morning finds you in the small sitting room that serves as your office, attending to Mrs. Ashford's correspondence. Your desk, positioned near the window for optimal light, holds an array of writing implements, steel-nibbed pens, a crystal inkwell filled with blue-black ink, pristine sheets of cream-laid paper embossed with the Ashford crest, and a small knife for trimming pen nibs. The ritual of letter writing is one you find peculiarly soothing, the scratch of nib on paper creating a rhythmic whisper in the quiet room. Each letter requires careful consideration of social precedence and proper form. To Lady Worthington, a woman of higher social standing, you write in Mrs. Ashford's voice but with particular attention to the elaborate courtesies required. To Mrs. Pemberton, a social equal, the tone may be warmer but must still maintain proper dignity. To tradespeople, the draper, the milliner, the wine merchant, you write with polite firmness, never forgetting that while Mrs. Ashford's custom is valuable, the relationship must maintain appropriate boundaries. Between letters, you pause to update Mrs. Ashford's calling card case, removing the cards of those who have called, turned down at the corner to indicate they came in person, and noting in your small leather journal who must be repaid with a visit. The complex dance of social calls, who must be visited, when, for how long, and in what order, requires the strategic planning of a military campaign. At 11 o'clock, Mrs. Ashford summons you to the drawing room for what she calls our little consultation. The drawing room, the showpiece of the house, exemplifies Edwardian taste at its finest. The walls are covered in moss green silk, paintings in heavy gilt frames depicting pastoral scenes and family portraits line the walls, and every surface bears some beautiful object: Sèvres porcelain shepherdesses, crystal decanters that catch the light, silver photograph frames containing images of departed family members and Queen Victoria in her latter years. Mrs. Ashford reclines on the velvet settee, her feet elevated on a small embroidered footstool, while you take your place in the straight-back chair nearby, your posture perfect, hands folded in your lap. These consultations cover everything from household management to social strategy, and you've learned to navigate them with careful attention. Cook has proposed a menu for Thursday's dinner party. You begin, consulting your notes. Consommé Celestine, sole à la Normande, saddle of mutton with red currant jelly, roast fowl, asparagus with hollandaise sauce, charlotte russe, and assorted ices. Mrs. Ashford nods thoughtfully. That sounds suitable. We must remember that Colonel Morrison is dyspeptic, ensure Cook prepares something plainer for him. And Mrs. Carmichael is attempting to reduce. She'll need to be served smaller portions without appearing to notice. You make careful notes, understanding that the success of the dinner party depends on countless such small considerations. The placement of guests at table, accounting for rank, age, and personal antipathies, the selection of wines. The late Mr. Ashford's cellar remains well stocked, but certain bottles must be saved for more important occasions. The hiring of extra staff for the evening, 2 additional footmen from the agency to ensure proper service, all fall within your purview. Now, Mrs. Ashford continues, her tone shifting to something more confidential. I've been thinking about young Mr. Robert Ashford, my nephew, you remember. He's coming to stay next month, and I have hopes. Well, the Pemberton girl would be quite suitable, don't you think? You consider carefully before responding. This is one of the more delicate aspects of your position, serving as a sounding board for Mrs. Ashford's matchmaking schemes while maintaining appropriate discretion. Miss Lydia Pemberton is certainly accomplished, you offer. Her piano playing is much admired, and her dowry is said to be considerable. £20,000, Mrs. Ashford confides, though you both pretend this information came from general knowledge rather than careful investigation. And she has such a sweet disposition. Not beautiful, perhaps, but pretty enough, and beauty fades, after all. Luncheon is a simple affair, clear soup, cold salmon with cucumber, and a lemon syllabub, taken again in the morning room. Mrs. Ashford's appetite is light at midday, her thoughts already turning toward the afternoon's social obligations. You read to her from Mr. Galsworthy's latest novel while she takes her meal, your voice rising and falling with the rhythm of the prose, careful to pause when she wishes to comment on the character's behavior or the author's social observations. After luncheon, the ritual of preparing for afternoon calls begins. You help Mrs. Ashford into her calling dress, the navy silk rustling like autumn leaves as you fasten the dozens of tiny covered buttons that run down the back. Her jewelry must be selected with care, substantial enough to display her status but not so ostentatious as to appear vulgar. The pearl necklace that was her mother's, the cameo brooch that Mr. Ashford gave her on their 20th anniversary, the simple gold wedding band that she has never removed. While Mrs. Ashford completes her toilette, you prepare her calling card case, ensuring she has adequate cards for the afternoon's visits, and check that her small beaded reticule contains her vinaigrette, in case of overwhelming odors, her small ivory fan, and a clean handkerchief edged with Valenciennes lace. You also discreetly slip in a few coins, though a lady of Mrs. Ashford's standing would never handle money directly in public. The carriage arrives promptly at 2:30, the coachman, Thompson, touching his hat as you help Mrs. Ashford navigate the front steps. Your role during these calling expeditions varies. Sometimes you accompany her, sitting slightly behind into the side in drawing rooms, contributing to conversation only when directly addressed. Other times, particularly when visiting intimate friends, you remain in the carriage or are sent on small errands. Today, you accompany her to Mrs. Pemberton's, where a small gathering of ladies has assembled for tea and conversation. The Pemberton drawing room is slightly grander than Mrs. Ashford's, with its Louis XV furniture and collection of Chinese porcelain, but you've learned to navigate these subtle displays of wealth without appearing either impressed or envious. You take your place slightly outside the main circle of conversation, your presence acknowledged but not emphasized. This is perhaps the most challenging aspect of your position, to be present enough to attend to Mrs. Ashford's needs but invisible enough not to intrude upon the social dynamics of her peers. You've perfected the art of the pleasant, neutral expression, the small smile that neither invites nor discourages interaction. The conversation flows around familiar channels, the upcoming tennis championships at the All England Club, though Mrs. Ashford considers the ladies' matches rather fast, the new vicar at St. Mary's, unmarried and said to have a small private income, the shocking news that the Duchess of Marlborough might be seeking a divorce, discussed in hushed tones with much disapproval but avid interest. Miss Lydia Pemberton, the object of Mrs. Ashford's matrimonial hopes for her nephew, pours tea with practiced grace. You observe her carefully, filing away details for later discussion, her modest demeanor, her careful attention to each guest, the way she blushes prettily when complimented on her arrangement of the tea table. She would indeed make a suitable wife for a young man of moderate prospects. Tea itself is an elaborate production, delicate spode china painted with roses, silver spoons so thin they seem to bend under the weight of sugar, tiny sandwiches of cucumber and watercress with the crusts removed, scones with clotted cream and strawberry jam, petit fours from Gunter's, and madeleines that Mrs. Pemberton's French cook produces with particular skill. You accept what is offered with quiet thanks, careful to eat slowly and sparingly, your manners impeccable but unobtrusive. The carriage ride home through the tree-lined streets of Wimbledon provides a moment of peaceful transition. The late afternoon sun filters through the leaves, creating dancing patterns of light and shadow. Mrs. Ashford dozes lightly, tired from the social exertions of the afternoon. while you watch the familiar houses pass by, each one a small kingdom with its own hierarchies and secrets. Upon returning home, you help Mrs. Ashford out of her calling dress and into a comfortable tea gown of mauve silk trimmed with cream lace. This is the signal that the formal part of the day has ended, though your duties continue in a different register. The tea gown, that peculiarly Edwardian invention, allows Mrs. Ashford to relax while maintaining appropriate dress should any intimate friends call unexpectedly. Dinner, when Mrs. Ashford dines alone, is served at 7 in the small dining room rather than the formal one. The reduced scale doesn't diminish the ceremony. James still serves each course with proper formality. The table is still set with the second best china and silver. Candles still flicker in their crystal holders. You dine with Mrs. Ashford on these occasions, a privilege that marks your special status in the household. Tonight's meal is elegantly simple: a delicate consommé, turbot in a cream sauce, roast chicken with bread sauce, French beans, and a gooseberry fool for dessert. The conversation is more relaxed than at breakfast or luncheon, Mrs. Ashford sometimes venturing into reminiscence about her youth, her courtship with Mr. Ashford, or observations about the changing world around them. "When I was a girl," she says, delicately dissecting her turbot, "we would never have dreamed of the freedoms young women have today. Why, I've heard that some girls are actually attending universities, studying alongside men. Can you imagine?" You murmur something appropriately noncommittal, having learned that Mrs. Ashford doesn't really want your opinion on such matters so much as an audience for her own reflections. In truth, you sometimes wonder what your life might have been if circumstances had been different, if your father hadn't lost his modest fortune in a failed speculation, if your mother hadn't died when you were 17, if you had brothers to support you rather than being the sole survivor of your family line. After dinner, you retire to the drawing room where the evening ritual unfolds with comforting predictability. Mrs. Ashford takes her place by the fire. Even in summer, a small fire burns in the grate for comfort and cheer, while you sit nearby with your needlework. Sometimes you read aloud. Mr. Trollope is a particular favorite, his lengthy novels perfect for evening entertainment. Sometimes Mrs. Ashford plays the piano, her fingers still nimble on the keys, favoring the romantic pieces of her youth, Chopin nocturnes and Schumann's scenes from childhood. Tonight, however, she wishes to work on her charitable sewing, simple garments for the poor children of Wimbledon. You both sew in companionable silence. The only sounds the whisper of thread through fabric, the settling of coals in the grate, and the steady tick of the ormolu clock on the mantelpiece. These quiet hours are perhaps your favorite part of the day, when the boundaries between employer and companion soften slightly, and you might almost be two women sharing an evening rather than mistress and paid dependent. At 9:30, you help Mrs. Ashford prepare for bed, unlacing her stays, helping her into her nightgown of fine lawn trimmed with Irish lace, brushing out her hair with 100 strokes as her own mother once did for her. You prepare her nightly tisane of chamomile and honey, ensure her book, currently Mrs. Gaskell's Cranford, and reading spectacles are within reach, and check that the windows are secured against the night air, which everyone knows carries dangerous miasmas. Your own evening hours, after Mrs. Ashford retires, belong to you within limits. You return to your room, that small kingdom under the eaves, and prepare for bed with your own simpler rituals. Your nightgown is cotton rather than lawn, practical rather than beautiful, but clean and comfortable. You brush your own hair by the light of a single candle, saving the gas for true necessity. Sometimes you read, improving books from the circulating library, or the occasional novel when you can afford it. Sometimes you write letters to distant cousins, the only family remaining to you, carefully maintaining connections that might someday prove important. Sometimes you simply sit by your window, looking out over the sleeping gardens, thinking about the strange path that led you to this life. You had been raised as a gentleman's daughter, educated in French and Italian, music and watercolors, trained for a life that evaporated with your father's bankruptcy and death. The skills that were meant to make you an accomplished wife instead became your means of survival. You're grateful, you know how much worse your situation could be. You've heard stories of governesses treated cruelly, companions dismissed without reference for trivial offenses, gentlewomen reduced to taking in sewing or, worse, disappearing into the anonymous masses of London's working poor. Mrs. Ashford is kind, in her way. She ensures you have adequate clothing, includes you in many of her social activities, remembers your birthday with a small gift, and has even hinted that she's made provision for you in her will. You have a comfortable room, good food, and work that, while sometimes tedious, is not physically demanding. You've learned to find satisfaction in small things, a perfectly written letter, a well-managed dinner party, the trust Mrs. Ashford places in your judgment. Yet sometimes, particularly on nights like this when the moon is full and the garden is bathed in silver light, you allow yourself to dream of a different life. Not the impossible dream of wealth and independence, but smaller hopes, perhaps someday establishing a small school for young ladies, or finding a position as companion to someone who travels, allowing you to see beyond the comfortable confines of Wimbledon. The grandfather clock strikes 11, its deep tone resonating through the quiet house. You close your window against the cool night air and prepare for bed. Tomorrow will bring its own gentle challenges. Mrs. Ashford's at-home day, when ladies of her acquaintance may call between 3 and 5 o'clock. You'll need to ensure the drawing room is perfectly arranged, that cook prepares appropriate refreshments, that Mary knows to use the best tea service, that James is prepared to announce visitors with proper formality. As you slip between the cool sheets, lavender scented from the sprigs tucked under your pillow, you hear the familiar sounds of the house settling for the night, the creak of cooling timbers, the distant sound of Thompson checking the horses one last time, the whisper of wind in the great elm tree outside your window. These sounds have become your lullaby, the rhythm of a life that, while perhaps not the one you imagined, has its own quiet dignity and purpose. Several weeks have passed in their gentle routine when the household begins to stir with unusual excitement. Lady Worthington's garden party approaches, and with it, the arrival of Mr. Robert Ashford, Mrs. Ashford's nephew from Yorkshire. The conjunction of these events has put Mrs. Ashford in a state of nervous anticipation that requires all your skills to manage. The morning of Mr. Robert's arrival dawns bright and clear, with that particular quality of English summer light that seems to make everything appear as if painted in watercolors. You rise earlier than usual to ensure everything is perfect for his reception. His room, the best guest chamber with its view of the garden, has been aired and prepared with military precision. Fresh flowers from the garden, white roses and blue delphiniums, arranged on the mantelpiece, new editions of Punch and the Strand magazine placed on the bedside table, the writing desk stocked with the finest paper and pens. Mrs. Ashford changes her dress 3 times before settling on a mauve afternoon dress that she feels strikes the right note of prosperous respectability without ostentation. You help her arrange her hair in a slightly more youthful style than usual, adding a small spray of violets that complements her dress. Her nervousness is touching. She hasn't seen her nephew in 2 years, and her hopes for his matrimonial prospects clearly weigh upon her. "Do you think the Pemberton girl will be at the garden party?" she asks for the 5th time as you adjust her collar. "I do so hope Robert will take notice of her. He's 28 now, quite time he was settled. His mother, my dear late sister, would have wanted to see him well established." The carriage arrives from the station at precisely 2 o'clock. From your position slightly behind Mrs. Ashford in the entrance hall, you observe Mr. Robert Ashford as James helps him from the carriage. He's a pleasant-looking young man, neither handsome nor plain, with sandy hair and an open, honest face that speaks well of his character. His clothes are well-made but slightly provincial in cut, suggesting that Yorkshire society hasn't quite the polish of London or even Wimbledon. The greeting between aunt and nephew is warm but properly restrained, a kiss on the cheek, hands held briefly, genuine affection expressed within the bounds of propriety. You're introduced with the careful formula that acknowledges your presence without emphasizing it. "This is Miss Hartwell, my companion. She's quite indispensable to me." Mr. Robert's bow is courteous, his smile genuine. "Miss Hartwell, my aunt has written of your invaluable assistance. I'm pleased to make your acquaintance." You curtsy appropriately, murmuring the proper response, but you notice his eyes linger on you a moment longer than strictly necessary. It's not improper, merely a recognition, perhaps, of your unique position, neither servant nor family, but something in between. Tea in the drawing room allows you to observe the family dynamics more closely. Mr. Robert has inherited the Ashford charm but tempered with what seems to be genuine kindness. He listens attentively to his aunt's news of local society, asks thoughtful questions about her health and comfort, and includes you in the conversation with a naturalness that speaks well of his manners. "I understand Wimbledon is quite transformed in recent years," he says, accepting his second cup of tea. "In Yorkshire, we hear of the tennis championships, of course, but the area itself must be much changed from my last visit." Mrs. Ashford launches into a detailed description of the new houses being built, the improvements to the common, the excellent railway connections to London. You contribute occasional details when she looks to you for confirmation, careful to speak only when invited but providing useful information about train schedules and local amenities. The conversation turns, inevitably, to the upcoming garden party. Mrs. Ashford manages to mention Miss Lydia Pemberton no fewer than 7 times in 10 minutes, extolling her virtues with an enthusiasm that makes Mr. Robert smile behind his teacup. "I look forward to meeting all your acquaintances, Aunt," he says diplomatically. "Though I confess, large social gatherings make me rather nervous. In Yorkshire, our entertainments are somewhat more modest." "Oh, but you mustn't be nervous," Mrs. Ashford insists. "Catherine will help you navigate. Won't you, dear? She knows everyone and has such a talent for making introductions." You incline your head, understanding that you've just been assigned the role of social facilitator in Mrs. Ashford's matchmaking scheme. It's a delicate position. You must help without appearing to manage, guide without seeming to direct. The day of Lady Worthington's garden party arrives with perfect weather, as if ordered specially for the occasion. The morning is spent in careful preparation. Mrs. Ashford's dress, a confection of pearl gray silk with touches of pink, requires 45 minutes to properly arrange. Her hat, a magnificent creation of tulle and artificial roses, must be pinned at precisely the right angle. Her parasol, gloves, fan, and reticule must all coordinate perfectly. Your own preparation is simpler but no less careful. Your best afternoon dress, a soft blue muslin that Mrs. Ashford passed on to you last season, skillfully altered to fit, is appropriate without being presumptuous. Your hat is modest, your gloves carefully mended, your appearance calculated to reflect well on Mrs. Ashford without drawing attention to yourself. Mr. Robert appears in his morning coat looking decidedly uncomfortable but properly attired. You notice his nervous adjustment of his cravat and offer a reassuring smile when Mrs. Ashford isn't looking. He returns it gratefully, and you realize that despite his 8 years' seniority, in this social battlefield, you are the veteran. The journey to Lady Worthington's estate in the barouche allows you to brief Mr. Robert discreetly on the personalities he'll encounter. Lady Worthington herself is very grand but kind-hearted, you murmur while Mrs. Ashford discusses the view with Thompson. She values genuine conversation over empty flattery. The Honorable Mr. Fitzgerald tends to dominate discussions of politics. A few thoughtful questions will satisfy him. Miss Pemberton, you pause delicately, is musical and appreciates anyone who shares that interest. The Worthington estate is magnificent in its summer glory. The gardens, designed by a pupil of Capability Brown, stretch in elegant curves toward a small ornamental lake. Striped marquees have been erected on the lawn, their pennants fluttering in the gentle breeze. Already, dozens of guests mill about in their finery, the ladies' dresses creating a shifting palette of pastels against the emerald grass. Lady Worthington receives guests near the terrace, resplendent in violet silk that matches the wisteria blooming behind her. Her greeting to Mrs. Ashford is warm, to Mr. Robert courteous with a hint of assessment, and to you, a gracious nod that acknowledges your existence without encouraging familiarity. The social choreography begins immediately. You guide Mrs. Ashford and Mr. Robert through the gardens, making introductions with practiced ease. Your role is complex, visible enough to facilitate but never prominent, speaking when necessary but never dominating, present but somehow insubstantial. Mrs. Pemberton, may I present Mr. Robert Ashford, Mrs. Ashford's nephew from Yorkshire? The formula never varies, the response predictable, yet each introduction requires careful attention to nuance and precedence. Miss Lydia Pemberton, when finally encountered near the Rose Garden, proves to be everything Mrs. Ashford hoped, pretty in a quiet way, with soft brown hair and gentle hazel eyes, dressed in pink organdy that complements her complexion. Her curtsy is graceful, her smile genuine but modest. You watch Mr. Roberts' reaction carefully and note with satisfaction a spark of genuine interest. I understand you're musical, Miss Pemberton, he says, remembering your hint. Do you play? A little, she responds with becoming modesty, though you know she's quite accomplished. I understand Yorkshire has a strong musical tradition. Do you play yourself, Mr. Ashford? As they continue their conversation, you guide Mrs. Ashford to a chair in the shade, fetching her a glass of lemonade from the refreshment tent. The afternoon unfolds in a series of carefully orchestrated social interactions, conversations joined and left at appropriate moments, refreshments taken with proper appreciation, compliments given and received according to strict but unwritten rules. You find yourself briefly alone near the herbaceous border, taking a moment to appreciate the delphiniums and hollyhocks in their full summer glory. The scent of roses and freshly cut grass mingles with the ladies' perfumes and the aroma of cucumber sandwiches and seed cake from the refreshment tent. Miss Hartwell? You turn to find Mr. Robert approaching, having temporarily escaped his aunt's supervision. Mr. Ashford. Are you enjoying the party? Very much, he says, though his expression suggests otherwise. Though I confess, I find these large gatherings rather overwhelming. How do you manage it so effortlessly? Practice, I suppose, you reply carefully. And the knowledge that most people are more concerned with their own performance than observing others' mistakes. He laughs, a genuine sound that draws a few glances. Wise words. I wonder, he pauses, seemingly aware of the delicacy of what he's about to say. It must be difficult, your position. Neither one thing nor the other. You're surprised by his perception and honesty. One adapts, you say simply. Every position in life has its challenges and compensations. Still, he continues, lowering his voice, it seems unfair that circumstances should define one's place so rigidly. In Yorkshire, well, perhaps it's not so different there, but it seems less orchestrated. Before you can respond, Mrs. Ashford's voice carries across the lawn, calling for you. The moment of unexpected connection passes, and you return to your duties, but you're aware of Mr. Robert's thoughtful gaze following you. The garden party continues until the shadows grow long across the lawn. By 5 o'clock, the guests begin to depart in a carefully timed sequence based on social rank and the distance to be traveled home. You help Mrs. Ashford navigate the farewell rituals, ensuring she speaks to everyone necessary, compliments Lady Worthington appropriately on the success of the event, and extracts a promise from Mrs. Pemberton to bring Lydia to tea the following week. The ride home is filled with Mrs. Ashford's exhausted but satisfied chatter about the party's success. Mr. Robert sits quietly, occasionally contributing an observation but seeming lost in thought. You maintain your usual silence, watching the familiar streets of Wimbledon pass by in the golden evening light. Back at the house, the evening routine adapts to accommodate their guest. Dinner is more elaborate: soup, fish, 2 entrees, roast, 2 sweets, and a savory, served in the formal dining room with the best china and silver. You dine with them, your presence now familiar enough to Mr. Robert that conversation flows naturally. Tell me about Yorkshire, Mrs. Ashford requests over the soup course. I haven't been north in years. Mr. Robert describes his life managing a modest estate, the challenges of modern farming, the slower pace of country life. His voice takes on warmth when he speaks of his home, and you find yourself imagining the rolling dales, the stone walls, the vast skies he describes. It's a simpler life than here, he concludes. Less society, perhaps, but more authentic, somehow. After dinner, in the drawing room, Mrs. Ashford plays the piano while Mr. Robert turns the pages for her. You sit with your embroidery, the needle moving in steady rhythm as you create tiny flowers on a handkerchief border. The music, a Chopin nocturne, flows through the room like liquid silver, mixing with the scent of the white roses in their crystal vases. When Mrs. Ashford tires, she requests that you play. It's not unusual. Your musical education, one of the accomplishments of your former life, is occasionally called upon for entertainment. You choose something simple but pleasant, a Mendelssohn song without words that you know well enough to play without sheet music. As your fingers move across the keys, you're aware of Mr. Robert moving to stand where he can watch your hands. When you finish, his applause is enthusiastic. That was beautifully played, Miss Hartwell. You have real talent. You're very kind, you respond, returning to your seat. But I'm merely competent. Miss Pemberton's playing is far superior. Perhaps, he says thoughtfully, but there was feeling in your performance. That's rarer than technical proficiency. Mrs. Ashford, missing the subtle undercurrent, immediately launches into praise of Miss Pemberton's musical abilities, and the moment passes. But you're increasingly aware of a tension in the room, delicate as a spider's web, that hadn't existed before Mr. Roberts' arrival. The following days settle into a new pattern accommodating Mr. Roberts' presence. He proves to be an easy guest, making few demands and showing genuine interest in the household's daily operations. Often, you find him in the library, reading or writing letters, his presence adding a different energy to the house's feminine atmosphere. Your duties expand to include facilitating his social integration. You accompany him and Mrs. Ashford on morning calls, provide him with subtle guidance on local customs, and help arrange his days to include the right balance of social obligation and personal freedom. One morning, while Mrs. Ashford rests with a headache, you're tasked with showing Mr. Robert the local points of interest. It's an unusual situation. Walking with a young man unchaperoned would typically be improper, but your position as companion creates a gray area in the social rules. Mrs. Ashford, focused on her matchmaking schemes, seems unconcerned about propriety in this instance. You walk through Wimbledon Common, maintaining a proper distance between you, your parasol creating a barrier of respectability. The morning is fresh and bright, with skylarks singing overhead and the grass still jeweled with dew. This must be very different from Yorkshire, you observe, gesturing toward the windmill in the distance. Different, yes, but beautiful in its own way, he replies. Though I confess I miss the wildness of the moors. Everything here seems so managed. You understand what he means. Even the common, supposedly wild, is carefully maintained, its paths swept, its boundaries defined. Order can be comforting, you suggest. Knowing one's place, understanding the rules. But don't you ever wish to break them? He asks suddenly, then colors slightly. Forgive me, that was impertinent. Not at all, you say carefully. But breaking rules requires either great courage or great resources. Most of us have neither. He's quiet for a moment, then says, You had a different life once, didn't you? Before becoming my aunt's companion? You're surprised by his directness but find yourself answering honestly. My father was a gentleman of modest means. I was raised with certain expectations that circumstances prevented from being fulfilled. And now you facilitate others' expectations, he observes. Like my aunt's hopes for me and Miss Pemberton. You pause, choosing your words carefully. Your aunt wants your happiness. She believes marriage to someone suitable would provide that. And what do you believe, Miss Hartwell? The question hangs in the air between you, dangerous in its implications. I believe, you say finally, that happiness comes in many forms, and that we must each find our own path to it. The conversation shifts to safer topics, but the undercurrent remains. You point out local landmarks, discuss the history of the area, maintain the proper social distance. Yet you're both aware that something has shifted, some boundary has been acknowledged even if not crossed. Returning to the house, you find Mrs. Ashford recovered and eager for news of your walk. Did you pass the Pemberton house? Such a lovely garden they have. Perfect for entertaining once Robert is settled nearby. The assumption that he'll remain in Wimbledon, marry Miss Pemberton, and live according to her plans is so complete that neither you nor Mr. Robert contradict her. But you catch his eye briefly and see your own understanding reflected there, that life rarely unfolds according to our plans. The tea party with Mrs. Pemberton and Lydia arrives with all the significance of a state occasion. Mrs. Ashford has planned every detail with military precision: the best tea service, cook's finest cakes, the drawing room arranged to best advantage with fresh flowers from the garden. You oversee the preparations with your usual quiet efficiency, ensuring Mary understands the exact temperature for the tea, that James knows the precise timing for bringing in fresh hot water, that the cucumber sandwiches are cut to uniform thinness. These details matter in ways that might seem trivial to an outsider but form the foundation of social success in this carefully ordered world. Miss Pemberton arrives in a dress of pale yellow that complements her complexion perfectly. You note with approval that she's made an effort without appearing to try too hard, a delicate balance that speaks well of her social instincts. Her mother, formidable in purple bombazine despite the warm weather, settles into the best chair with an air of inspection. The conversation follows predictable channels at first: the weather, unseasonably warm; the garden party, a great success; the upcoming tennis championships, rather too athletic for ladies, in Mrs. Pemberton's opinion. You pour tea with practiced grace, offering sugar and milk with just the right degree of deference, maintaining your curious position as both servant and participant. Mr. Robert arrives 15 minutes into the visit, late enough not to appear eager, early enough to show proper interest. His bow to both ladies is perfectly judged, and you see Mrs. Ashford's satisfaction at his performance. "Miss Pemberton," he says, taking the seat strategically placed near hers, "my aunt tells me you've been studying German. How ambitious of you." Lydia blushes prettily. "Only a little. Papa believes languages are improving for young ladies, though Mama worries it might be too taxing." "Nonsense," Mrs. Ashford interjects. "Catherine reads German beautifully. She's been helping me with some correspondence from my late husband's German colleagues. Haven't you, dear?" You acknowledge this with a slight nod, uncomfortable at being drawn into the conversation but understanding Mrs. Ashford's strategy, establishing that intellectual accomplishments are acceptable in women of appropriate standing. The afternoon progresses with the young people gradually warming to each other. Miss Pemberton reveals a quiet wit beneath her modest demeanor, while Mr. Robert shows genuine interest in her thoughts and opinions. You observe their interaction with mixed feelings, satisfaction at the success of Mrs. Ashford's matchmaking, but also a strange melancholy you don't care to examine too closely. As the tea things are cleared, Mrs. Pemberton suggests that Lydia might play for them. "She's been practicing a new piece by Grieg," she announces with maternal pride. The migration to the piano allows for a subtle rearrangement of the social geography. Lydia plays competently, her technique precise if not inspired. Mr. Robert turns pages for her, their hands occasionally brushing as they manage the music. Mrs. Ashford and Mrs. Pemberton exchange meaningful glances of satisfaction. You retreat to your usual corner, picking up your needlework, trying to become invisible. But you feel Mr. Robert's eyes on you periodically, comparing perhaps, or simply aware of your presence in a way that makes you unaccountably warm. After the Pembertons depart, Mrs. Ashford is effusive in her satisfaction. Did you see how well they got on? And she's so accomplished. £20,000 in musical, what more could one want? Mr. Robert responds appropriately, praising Miss Pemberton's qualities, but there's something mechanical in his agreement. You busy yourself with tidying the tea things, avoiding his gaze, maintaining the boundaries that keep your world stable. That evening, you find yourself alone in the morning room, updating Mrs. Ashford's correspondence ledger by lamplight. The house is quiet, Mrs. Ashford having retired early with another headache, the servants below stairs enjoying their evening meal. A soft knock at the door makes you look up. Mr. Roberts stands in the doorway, hesitant. I apologize for disturbing you, Miss Hartwell. I was looking for something to read and saw the light. The library is at your disposal, Mr. Ashford, you say formally, returning to your ledger. He doesn't leave, instead stepping into the room. May I ask you something? You set down your pen carefully, folding your hands. Of course. Do you think, that is, what's your honest opinion of Miss Pemberton? The question is highly improper, but the earnestness in his voice makes you answer. She's everything your aunt believes her to be, accomplished, well-dowered, and of good character. That's not what I asked. You meet his eyes then, seeing in them a plea for honesty in this world of careful performance. I think, you say slowly, that she would make someone an excellent wife. Whether that someone is you, only you can determine. He nods, seeming to understand the careful balance of your response. And happiness? Where does that factor into these arrangements? Happiness, you say, returning to your ledger to avoid his too perceptive gaze, is a luxury not everyone can afford to consider. The following week brings a change in weather that mirrors the subtle tension in the household. Clouds gather on the horizon, promising the kind of summer storm that will break the heat but leave everything unsettled in its wake. Mrs. Ashford's rheumatism flares with the dropping pressure, confining her to her room and leaving you to manage the household with even greater autonomy. Mr. Robert has been formally calling on Miss Pemberton, taking her driving in the park, attending musical evenings at her home. The neighborhood watches with approval, already considering the match as good as made. Yet you notice his increasing restlessness, the way he paces the library, the long walks he takes alone on the common. One afternoon, while Mrs. Ashford sleeps, you're in the conservatory tending to her orchids, delicate creatures that require precise care. The air is thick with humidity and the sweet scent of blooming jasmine. You're adjusting the Venetian blinds to protect the more delicate specimens when you hear footsteps. They're beautiful, Mr. Roberts says, admiring a particularly fine cattleya. But they seem sad, somehow. Trapped in glass, forced to bloom far from their natural home. They wouldn't survive in England without the glass, you point out, misting a dendrobium with careful attention. Sometimes adaptation requires artificial barriers. And do you feel that way, Miss Hartwell? Protected by barriers? You set down the mister, turning to face him. Mr. Ashford, this conversation is inappropriate. Is it? He challenges gently. Or is that just another barrier? We can discuss orchids but not ourselves. We can facilitate others' happiness but not acknowledge our own thoughts. Your aunt has been very kind to me, you say firmly. I won't repay that kindness with impropriety. And yet, he says, moving closer but still maintaining a proper distance, Isn't there a different kind of cruelty in everyone pretending not to see what's evident? What's evident, you say, your voice steady despite your racing heart, is that you're expected to propose to Miss Pemberton, that she's everything suitable, and that your aunt's happiness depends upon this match. And your happiness is not a factor in this equation. Thunder rumbles in the distance, and you both look toward the darkening sky. The storm that's been building for days is finally approaching. I should check that the windows are secured, you say, moving toward the door. Catherine, he says, using your Christian name for the first time, and you stop, your hand on the door handle. What if I don't want Miss Pemberton? What if the person I've come to admire is someone whose intelligence and grace make every carefully suitable young lady seem insipid by comparison? You close your eyes briefly, gathering strength. Then I would say you're suffering from the confusion that comes from being in an unfamiliar environment. It will pass once you return to Yorkshire. And if it doesn't? It must, you say simply, and leave the conservatory before he can respond. The storm breaks that evening with spectacular force. Lightning illuminates the gardens in stark, momentary tableaus, while thunder shakes the windows in their frames. Mrs. Ashford, recovered enough to come downstairs, sits in the drawing room fretfully watching the tempest. I do hope the Pemberton's garden party tomorrow won't be affected, she worries. Robert must propose then. Mrs. Pemberton has been dropping hints, and any further delay would be noted. You murmur reassurances while watching Mr. Roberts' reflection in the rain-streaked window. He's staring into the fire, his expression unreadable. The tension in the room is as palpable as the electricity in the air outside. Dinner is a stilted affair, conversation faltering between the crashes of thunder. The storm seems to have stripped away the comfortable veneer of social nicety, leaving everyone raw and uncertain. Even James seems affected, nearly dropping a serving dish when a particularly violent thunderclap coincides with his entrance. After dinner, Mrs. Ashford retires early, the storm having exhausted her nerves. You're left to close up the drawing room, ensuring the fires are banked, the lamps extinguished. Mr. Robert remains in his chair by the dying fire. You should retire, Mr. Ashford, you say softly. Tomorrow will be a significant day. He looks up at you, and in his eyes you see a turmoil that matches the storm outside. Must it be? Must we all play our assigned roles regardless of our true feelings? Yes, you say simply. That's what civilization means. We subordinate our desires to the greater good. And whose good is served by unhappiness? Unhappiness is not the same as the absence of happiness, you say, drawing on hard-won wisdom. Most people live in the space between, finding contentment in duty and purpose. Is that enough for you? You consider the question honestly. It has to be. He stands then, moving toward you with intention. For a moment, you think he might do something irreversible, cross the boundary that cannot be uncrossed. But he stops just out of reach, his hands clenched at his sides. I return to Yorkshire next week, he says. After the engagement is announced. That would be best, you agree, though your voice catches slightly. Will you be happy for me? I'll be happy that Mrs. Ashford's wishes have been fulfilled, you say carefully. She deserves that satisfaction. He nods, understanding the careful distinction. Good night, Miss Hartwell. Good night, Mr. Ashford. You leave him standing by the dying fire and climb the stairs to your room. The storm continues to rage outside, rain lashing against your window with violent intensity. You sit in your narrow bed, arms wrapped around your knees, and allow yourself just this one night to feel the full weight of what cannot be. The morning after the storm dawns fresh and clear, as if the world has been washed clean. The garden sparkles with residual raindrops that catch the early sunlight like scattered diamonds. The air smells of wet earth and roses, and birds sing with particular enthusiasm, celebrating the storm's passage. Mrs. Ashford wakes refreshed, her spirits high with anticipation of the day's events. You help her dress with special care, her best afternoon dress of lavender silk, her mother's pearl necklace, the diamond brooch Mr. Ashford gave her on their silver anniversary. She looks handsome and dignified, every inch the successful matron seeing her plans come to fruition. "I've written to Robert's mother," she confides as you arrange her hair. "She'll be so pleased. A connection with the Pembertons will elevate the entire family. And £20,000 will certainly help with the Yorkshire estate." You murmur appropriate agreement, your fingers steady despite the ache in your chest. This is what you've worked toward, after all, Mrs. Ashford's happiness and social success. Your own feelings are irrelevant, a luxury you cannot afford. Mr. Robert appears at breakfast looking pale but resolute. He's dressed with particular care, his morning coat pressed to perfection, his cravat tied with mathematical precision. He meets your eyes briefly as you pour his coffee, and in that glance is a world of unspoken communication, regret, resignation, a plea for understanding. The journey to the Pembertons' estate is subdued despite Mrs. Ashford's cheerful chatter. The gardens, when you arrive, show some damage from the storm, a few broken branches, flower beds somewhat disheveled, but the staff has worked miracles to restore order. Chinese lanterns have been strung between the trees, though they won't be lit until evening, and a small orchestra is tuning their instruments on the terrace. The party is more intimate than Lady Worthington's affair, perhaps 30 guests, all carefully chosen for their connection to the potential union. You recognize the subtle orchestration, the way certain guests have been positioned to witness what everyone expects to occur. Your role today is particularly delicate. You must be present enough to support Mrs. Ashford but invisible enough not to intrude upon the romantic tableau being constructed. You find a bench partially concealed by a trellis of climbing roses, where you can observe without being observed. Miss Pemberton looks lovely in white muslin with blue ribbons, the picture of virginal expectation. She and Mr. Robert are guided by social currents toward the Rose Arbor, the traditional location for proposals in the Pemberton garden, you've learned from local gossip. The other guests maintain a careful distance, present but not intrusive, ready to offer congratulations once the deed is done. You watch Mr. Robert lead Miss Pemberton toward the appointed spot, see him speak earnestly to her. Even from a distance, you can read the scene, his formal posture, her modest downcast eyes, the moment when he takes her hand. It's like watching a play where everyone knows the ending, each actor performing their prescribed role. But then something unexpected happens. Miss Pemberton shakes her head, stepping back. Her voice carries on the breeze, not the words but the tone, gentle, regretful, but firm. Mr. Roberts stands frozen, clearly unprepared for this deviation from the script. The carefully composed tableau dissolves into confusion. Mrs. Pemberton rushes to her daughter, Mrs. Ashford hurries toward her nephew, and the other guests mill about in delighted scandal, pretending concern while mentally composing the letters they'll write about this extraordinary event. You remain on your bench, watching the social chaos unfold. Through the melee, you see Miss Pemberton break away from her mother and approach your hiding spot. She sits beside you uninvited, her pretty face flushed but determined. "I suppose you think me very foolish," she says without preamble. "Not at all, Miss Pemberton. It takes courage to refuse an expected proposal." She looks at you with surprise. "You understand, then? Everyone will say I'm mad to refuse him. He's perfectly suitable, and I'll likely not receive a better offer. And yet..." She sighs, plucking at her ribbons. "And yet, when I looked at him, I saw a man whose heart was elsewhere. Oh, he would have been kind, dutiful, everything proper. But I want more than that. Is that so wrong?" "No," you say softly. "It's not wrong at all." She studies you for a moment with unexpected perspicacity. "It's you, isn't it? The reason his heart is elsewhere?" You stand abruptly. "I should see to Mrs. Ashford. She'll be distressed." Miss Pemberton catches your hand. "I'm not angry. If anything, I'm grateful. You've saved us both from a lifetime of polite unhappiness." You press her hand briefly, then make your way through the agitated crowd to Mrs. Ashford, who is indeed in a state of near collapse. You guide her to a chair, fetch her smelling salts, fan her heated face, all while maintaining perfect composure despite the turmoil in your own heart. The journey home is conducted in Arctic silence. Mrs. Ashford sits rigid with disappointment and embarrassment. Mr. Roberts stares out the window, and you maintain your usual position, physically present but socially invisible. The only sounds are the horse's hooves and the creak of the carriage wheels. Upon reaching home, Mrs. Ashford retires immediately to her room with a severe headache, leaving you to manage the household crisis. Mr. Robert disappears into the library, and you're left to soothe the servants, who have already heard through the mysterious networks of domestic intelligence about the failed proposal. Poor Mr. Robert, Mary sighs as she helps you air out Mrs. Ashford's second-best dress for evening. He seemed so taken with Miss Pemberton. "These things happen," you say neutrally, checking the dress for any needed repairs. "We must all carry on as usual." But nothing is usual. The house feels charged with unspoken emotions, like the air before another storm. Mrs. Ashford keeps to her room for 2 days, taking only broth and toast, refusing to see even her closest friends who call to offer sympathy and gather gossip. Mr. Robert haunts the house like a ghost, appearing at meals but barely speaking, spending long hours walking the common regardless of weather. On the 3rd day, you're summoned to Mrs. Ashford's room. She's sitting up in bed, looking older and more fragile than you've ever seen her. "Catherine," she says, her voice weak, "I need you to arrange Robert's return to Yorkshire. Tomorrow, if possible. His presence here is too painful." "Of course, Mrs. Ashford. I'll see to the travel arrangements immediately." She looks at you then with an expression you can't quite read. "You've been a good companion to me, Catherine. I hope you know how much I value your service." "Thank you, Mrs. Ashford. Your kindness has meant everything to me." She waves a dismissive hand, but you see tears in her eyes. "Go on, then. There's much to arrange." You spend the afternoon organizing Mr. Roberts' departure, booking his railway ticket, arranging for his luggage to be packed, ensuring his traveling clothes are properly pressed. You perform these tasks with mechanical efficiency, trying not to think about what his departure means. That evening, with Mrs. Ashford still indisposed, you and Mr. Robert dine alone in uncomfortable intimacy. The servants serve the meal with unusual discretion, sensing perhaps the charged atmosphere. "I'm sorry," he says finally, breaking the silence. "For the disappointment I've caused my aunt. For the embarrassment. Miss Pemberton refused you, you point out. The embarrassment is not entirely yours." He gives a bitter laugh. "She refused me because she could see what everyone else pretends not to notice. That my heart wasn't in it. Your heart's whereabouts are not my concern, Mr. Ashford. Aren't they?" He leans forward intently. "Catherine, I must speak." "No," you interrupt firmly. "You must not. Tomorrow you return to Yorkshire, to your life there. I remain here, in mine. Whatever you think you feel, it's impossible." "Why?" "Because of social convention? Because of money? Because of reality, you say. I am a paid companion with no fortune, no connections, no future beyond service. You are a gentleman with responsibilities, expectations, a position to maintain. Even if your aunt could forgive such a betrayal, which she couldn't, the world would never accept it. Then I'll change the world." You smile sadly at his vehemence. "The world doesn't change, Mr. Ashford. We adapt to it or we're crushed by it." He reaches across the table, grasping your hand before you can withdraw it. "Come with me to Yorkshire. Not as my wife, I understand that's impossible now, but as something. Housekeeper, companion to my mother, anything. Just come." You feel the warmth of his hand, memorize the sensation even as you gently extract yourself from his grip. "And destroy the reputation I've spent years building? Become the subject of gossip and speculation? No, Mr. Ashford. I've worked too hard for my respectability to throw it away on an impossible dream." He sits back, defeated. "Then this is goodbye." "Yes," you say simply. "This is goodbye." Mr. Roberts' departure the next morning is managed with minimal drama. Mrs. Ashford doesn't emerge from her room, claiming continued indisposition. You oversee his luggage being loaded onto the carriage, hand him his traveling case with his tickets and a small package of sandwiches cook has prepared for the journey. At the door, he pauses. "Catherine, Miss Hartwell. I want you to know that meeting you has changed me. Whatever happens, I won't forget. Travel safely, Mr. Ashford," you respond formally, aware of James hovering nearby. "Your aunt will want to hear of your safe arrival." He nods, understanding the dismissal, and climbs into the carriage. You watch it disappear down the drive, then turn back to the house and the life that continues within it. Mrs. Ashford emerges from her seclusion gradually, like a wounded animal testing the safety of the world. Your relationship shifts subtly but significantly. The failed matchmaking has aged her, made her more dependent on your companionship, but also more distant. There's an unspoken question in her eyes sometimes when she looks at you, but she never voices it. Life resumes its familiar patterns, but with variations. The social calls continue, but with a different tenor, sympathy rather than congratulation, careful avoidance of certain topics. Miss Pemberton, surprisingly, has enhanced her reputation by refusing Mr. Robert. Word has spread that she rejected him for insufficient feeling, and she's now seen as a romantic figure rather than a foolish girl. She's received 2 new proposals within a month, accepting the second from a young barrister with excellent prospects and, apparently, genuine devotion. You continue your duties with the same quiet efficiency, but something within you has shifted. The contentment you once found in routine now feels more like resignation. You catch yourself staring out windows, lost in thought during tasks that once fully occupied your attention. Mrs. Ashford notices but says nothing, perhaps understanding too well the nature of your distraction. Autumn arrives with its familiar melancholy beauty. The leaves on the trees along Marriott Road turn gold and crimson, falling in gentle spirals to carpet the streets. The social season shifts from garden parties to indoor entertainments, musical evenings, small dinners, charity bazaars for various worthy causes. One gray October afternoon, you're sorting through Mrs. Ashford's correspondence when you come across a letter with Yorkshire postmark. Your heart accelerates, but the handwriting is unfamiliar, feminine and elderly. It's from Robert's mother, Mrs. Ashford says, having noticed your attention. Read it to me, dear. My eyes are tired. The letter is brief and formal, thanking Mrs. Ashford for her hospitality to Robert, mentioning that he's thrown himself into improving the estate with renewed vigor, and ending with a curious postscript. Robert has asked me to inquire whether you might spare Miss Hartwell for a position here. I find myself in need of a companion, and Robert speaks highly of her capabilities. Mrs. Ashford is quiet for a long moment after you finish reading. Well, she says finally, what do you think of that? I think, you say carefully, that Mrs. Ashford Sr. must be quite elderly and perhaps not fully aware of the circumstances of Mr. Robert's visit. Mrs. Ashford studies you with those sharp blue eyes that miss very little. And you have no interest in the position? My place is here, with you, Mrs. Ashford. She nods slowly. Yes. I suppose it is. But the letter has disturbed the delicate equilibrium you've maintained. That night, you lie awake thinking about Yorkshire, about what might be waiting there, about the dangerous hope the letter has awakened. Winter comes early that year, bringing with it a series of fogs that wrap Wimbledon in soft gray wool. The house becomes an island in the mist, isolated from the world beyond its walls. Mrs. Ashford's rheumatism worsens with the damp, confining her increasingly to her room. One particularly foggy evening in November, as you're reading to her from Tennyson, she interrupts suddenly. I'm dying, Catherine. You set down the book carefully. Mrs. Ashford, you mustn't say such things. Nonsense. We both know it's true. The doctor dances around it, but I can feel it. Perhaps not tomorrow or next month, but soon. She looks at you with unexpected intensity. I need to know you'll be provided for. You've been more than generous already. I've been selfish, she interrupts. Keeping you here, knowing what I knew. Oh yes, she adds, seeing your surprise. I'm not blind. I saw how Robert looked at you, and more importantly, how you didn't look at him. Mrs. Ashford. Let me finish. I've changed my will. You'll have £500 a year for life. It's not a fortune, but it's independence, You could establish that school you sometimes dream about, or travel, or... She pauses significantly. Accept a position in Yorkshire without concern for your future security. Tears blur your vision. I don't know what to say. Say you'll be happy, she says simply. Say you'll take the chance I was too conventional to allow you before. You take her hand, feeling how fragile the bones have become. You've been the kindest employer anyone could wish for. And you've been more than a companion, she replies. You've been the daughter I never had. Which is why I want you to have what I couldn't give my own child, the freedom to choose your own path. Mrs. Ashford lives through the winter, fading gradually like the light on a winter afternoon. You tend to her with devoted care, managing her household, her correspondence, her slow departure from the world she knew so well. She dies in March, as the first crocuses push through the cold earth, passing peacefully in her sleep. The funeral is well attended, her place in Wimbledon society ensuring a proper send-off. You stand at the graveside in your black dress, accepting condolences with appropriate gravity. Miss Pemberton, now Mrs. Harrison, presses your hand warmly. Lady Worthington nods with surprising kindness. Even Mrs. Pemberton acknowledges your loss. The will is read the following week, causing considerable stir among Mrs. Ashford's distant relations. Your legacy is confirmed, £500 annually, plus a generous bequest of personal items including some jewelry and books. It's enough to transform your life from dependence to modest independence. A week after the funeral, you receive another letter from Yorkshire. This time, the handwriting is familiar. Inside is a single line: Mother still has need of a companion, if you're free to accept the position. You stand in the morning room where so much of your life has unfolded, holding the letter, feeling the weight of decision. Through the window, you can see the garden coming alive with spring, the world renewing itself as it always does. You think of Mrs. Ashford's final gift, not just the money, but the permission to choose happiness over convention. You think of the quiet years of service, the satisfaction of duty fulfilled, the safety of known boundaries. And you think of a conservatory filled with trapped orchids, of storms that clear the air, of the dangerous possibility of joy. Taking up your pen, you write a brief response: I am free to accept the position. I can arrive by month's end. As you seal the letter, you feel something shift inside you, like a door opening onto a garden you've only glimpsed through windows. The future spreads before you, uncertain but full of possibility. You've been transformed once by circumstance, from gentleman's daughter to paid companion. Now you transform yourself again, from companion to something yet to be determined. The sun breaks through the morning clouds, filling the room with golden light. Somewhere, a blackbird begins to sing, its melody carrying on the spring breeze. You close your eyes and allow yourself, for the first time in years, to imagine happiness not as something observed in others but as something you might claim for yourself. And so, dear listener, as you drift towards sleep, imagine yourself in that morning room, sunlight warming your face, the letter posted, your decision made. The world of Edwardian Wimbledon continues its gentle rhythm around you, the clip-clop of horses' hooves on the street outside, the distant call of a flower seller, the whisper of wind through the new spring leaves. Your journey to Yorkshire will be different from your arrival in Wimbledon those years ago. This time, you travel not in defeat but in hope, not as someone fleeing from loss but as someone moving toward possibility. The train will carry you north through the changing landscape, from the manicured gardens of the south to the wild moors of Yorkshire, from the known to the unknown, from safety to adventure. What awaits you there remains unwritten. Perhaps a simple position as companion to an elderly lady, nothing more than a continuation of your service in a different setting. Or perhaps something more, a chance at the life you thought impossible, a breaking of those social boundaries that seemed so fixed. The future shimmers with uncertainty, but for the first time, uncertainty feels like freedom rather than fear. As you pack your few belongings, the silver pocket watch from your mother, the books Mrs. Ashford left you, the small collection of letters you've saved, each item carries the weight of memory but also the lightness of release. You're leaving behind not just a place but a version of yourself, the careful, contained Catherine who knew her place so well. The house on Marriott Road will soon belong to Mrs. Ashford's nephew from her side of the family. New servants will polish the silver and tend the garden. New lives will unfold in those familiar rooms. But you carry with you the lessons learned in that gentle prison, the value of kindness, the importance of dignity, the strength found in service, and now, the courage to reach for happiness. Rest now, dear listener, in this moment of transformation. Let the gentle sounds of Edwardian England fade into the whisper of your own breathing. You are safe, you are valued, you are free to choose your own path. The morning will bring its own adventures, but for now, sleep, and dream of gardens where orchids bloom freely, of Yorkshire moors stretching endlessly under wide skies, of a life where love might transcend the boundaries that seemed so permanent. Close your eyes and feel yourself drifting, carried gently into slumber by the rhythm of a world that moves at the pace of horses and handwritten letters, where change comes slowly but surely, where even the most carefully ordered life can open unexpectedly into joy. Sleep well, and dream of transformation, of possibility, of the gentle courage it takes to reach for happiness in any age.